What's going on, everybody? If you're
Mic
looking,
check, 1 2
yes,
1 2.
they're
Mic
on.
check, 1 2 1 2.
So they had started the stream, and there was no audio, and we just called in and let them know. And now they know, and they've been going for a few minutes, but at least we have audio now. And yeah, let's see. Up. But you can thank yours truly. Just got off the phone with the committee staff. You can fact check me on this. Good morning, everybody. It's been a few weeks. They took off. You know, they gave themselves off. They have the best schedule in the world, best hors d'oeuvres, health insurance. What don't they give themselves? So as you see, they just went on break, probably recalibrating, seeing what they have, which is absolutely nothing. They've been muted the whole time. I didn't want to go live with that. I mean, it seemed a little boring. I wasn't sure if I was able to call in and get them to fix it. I didn't want to cover that because I've done this before with no luck, and this time I got lucky. I got through to somebody and they were able to fix it. So, very cool. Here we go.
Subcommittee on Government Operations will come to order. Welcome everyone, and to our guests who have taken time to be here, as well as the members and their staff. Thank you very much for preparation for today. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time, and I would recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's hearing regarding updates to the Department of Defense's progress towards achieving a clean audit opinion. I would like to thank our witnesses for testifying today on this very important topic. I would also like to thank subcommittee members on both sides for staying committed to shining a light on financial management issues that the Department of Defense faces and working towards a solution together to that future. I've said this before, but financial transparency of the military is critical. It's critical for the military, and it's critical for the American people to know that they have the confidence that is being well managed. So the question is, how can we remain confident in the Department of Defense's ability to protect American assets and interest if they cannot properly manage their expenses or assets, perhaps not even knowing where they are? We're here today because the Department of Defense is still unable to achieve a clean audit of their financial statements. In fiscal year 2024, the Department of Defense reported more than $909 billion, half the discretionary spending of the United States, but still holds the distinction of being the only federal agency that has never passed a comprehensive audit. The Department of Defense has more than 28 components, and it's fair to say that some are doing better at financial management than others. For this year's past financial audit, components that could not be audited accounted for at least 48% of DoD's total assets and at least 64% of DoD's budget. It's important to note that this is more than just a paper exercise. It is understanding where your assets are and how much taxpayer funding is left. It's important that the military gain a complete picture of military readiness, as well as Congress that counts on these reports. Even though roughly half of DoD passed, the services who receive the most amount of money and the most assets account for the areas where they are struggling to track their spending and assets. Balancing the checkbook is more than just military preparedness. I believe it goes hand in hand, both understanding where the checkbook is, where the assets are, and military preparedness. Financial security is national security. The Joint Strike Fighter program is a multi-service, multinational program that will cost more than $2 trillion over the lifetime, its lifetime of service, according to the GAO. For fiscal year 2024, auditors found that DoD management did not account for, manage, or report Joint Strike Fighter government property. Not fully reporting this information resulted in material misstatements across DoD assets. Because DoD could not provide reliable information to verify the existence, completeness, or value of the program's government properties, auditors were unable to quantify the amount of these misstatements. This means that there are monetary and operational gaps. Last September, the subcommittee, with the help of GAO, created a scorecard to track DoD's progress towards achieving a clean audit opinion. Rather than continuing to say that DoD isn't doing a good job making progress towards achieving a clean audit, we wanted something that would show that they were, in fact, on the road, and I think we were here today, to fixing not only those things that are internally imperative to this, but good ideas from certain elements within DoD that are taking the lead. This is especially important because DoD is mandated to achieve a clean audit by 2028. It is and should remain the goal of this subcommittee and of Congress to hold DoD accountable. Today, we plan to discuss the progress that DoD has made and the challenges they face. As this new administration is planning for the future, it will be imperative to understand where the department has been, where it needs to go, and what is standing in the way. Today, we are also unveiling a new section of the scorecard that focuses on fraud risk management. We have talked about fraud prevention for many years, so I am very excited to see a new method to track progress in preventing fraud in the areas of procurement and contracting. Strong financial management systems are an important part of fraud prevention. Seeing inside that is essential. What we've seen over the years is that DoD has struggled in maintaining and updating systems, and these systems are critical if we're going to get where we want to go with a clean audit. Last Congress, we were told that DoD had to achieve a clean audit opinion by December 2028. We made that commitment, and today I think we will show where there's strong, significant progress by 2026. That's why we're here. We're having this discussion. But it also is a commitment by the gentleman, the ranking member, Mr. Nfume, and myself, to make sure that we go beyond these hearings and to actually engage the Department of Defense. Unfortunately, today, the Office of the Secretary of Defense will not be a part of the conversation. They will be missed, and both Mr. Nfume and I plan to visit the Pentagon to lead that discussion with the Secretary of Defense. We hope that they will see this as an opportunity to listen and learn, to take some of what we're hearing today, but to move forward together. And I would now yield for the gentleman's time for an opening statement. Mr. Nfume, gentleman's recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you. Good morning to our witnesses, and good morning to those of you in attendance. I want to particularly thank Chairman Sessions for doggedly following up on this issue. He and I feel very, very strongly, as some of you know, that we just can't keep going down this street. I want to thank Mr. Khan, Mr. Mansfield. Good to see both of you again. Last September, we held the second hearing to address financial accountability in the Department of Defense. And so, as fate would have it, we are back here today to continue that conversation in light of the Department of Defense's continued inability to pass a department-wide audit. It's not new for the DoD, and I share the chairman's commitment to holding that entire agency accountable. For years, the Department of Defense has tried, but as we know, failed to successfully complete a clean department-wide audit. A clean audit is not judging the merits of DoD spending, which we do not do in this committee, but it's asking what is that spending and how do you explain that spending and the accountability of it. DoD has failed to meet this basic standard to provide proper evidence to show that they accurately accounted for their finances. Now, let me be redundant. There have been 7, if you're listening at home or watching, 7 straight audits that have been failed by the Department of Defense. I want to be deliberately redundant about this because that number, every time I say it, continues to strike a great deal of horror at me that it happens and continues to happen. And I want to underscore that I'm not really into a lot of graphics, Mr. Chairman, but this time I want to just repeat the fact that we have had 7 audits, and you can see going back to 2018. Raise it up, would you? Failed, 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 failed. That's embarrassing. It's the greatest country on the face of the earth, and we can't even get an audit completed. So I hope that if the leadership of the department is watching, that they understand how serious this is for those of us who personally are just offended that this continues to happen. And I can't stress enough my thanks to the chairman for working on this issue together. So while the Department of Defense has still not produced a clean audit, there was significant progress. Under the previous administration, that progress was spurred by Secretary Lord Austin's focus on modernizing financial systems, which helped to lead the U.S. Marine Corps to adopting a 2-year audit approach and achieving a clean audit opinion for fiscal year 2023 and 2024. God bless the United States Marines. That progress is critically important, and so I think it's up to us to determine how to get other components at DoD up to the standard that the Marine Corps is at. Chairman Sessions and I are dedicated to ensuring accountability for the hundreds of billions of dollars in spending and the $4 trillion in total assets that make up our defense budget. In fiscal year 2024, U.S. taxpayers entrusted $909 billion to the Department of Defense, one of the largest investments in our nation's history. And while we continue to provide the DoD with escalating sums of money, only 11 out of the 24 total components at DoD were able to achieve a clean audit. The components that failed, unfortunately, include the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. Those 3 alone comprise 90% of DoD's assets by dollar amount. Now, standing in the way of a clean audit is the wide prevalence of material weaknesses, which we've been told over and over again. That is an accounting term for the areas in which the Department of Defense lacks internal controls over financial reporting, material weaknesses. Year after year, these material weaknesses cause the Department of Defense to be the only major federal agency unable to achieve a clean audit opinion. This, along with a number of other long-standing issues, serves as a daily reminder of DoD's history of pervasive deficiencies in financial management systems, business processes, internal controls, and financial reporting. So under these conditions, it makes the administration's goal of raising the Pentagon's budget to $1 trillion particularly puzzling, absolutely puzzling, I should say. Under the department, we have seen so many things take place, and I'm convinced that until the department can restore full faith and accountability for these critical dollars, I can't justify increasing their budget even further, especially in light of the pressing need for funds in so many other areas of overall spending where we've taken a chainsaw and cut the hell out of it. It's even harder for me to justify any increases in the Pentagon's budget in the midst of its current leadership crisis. During our last hearing on this topic, our witnesses discussed the importance of leadership from, quote, the top down. And they said that was important in creating a culture within the DoD where accountability at long last really does matter. Right now, we're seeing a distinct lack of leadership, especially in the realm of accountability. And I join the chairman in expressing the hope that either Secretary Hegseth will come before this committee and talk to us about that accountability and what's being done, or that we will find ourselves at the Pentagon trying to, again, get some real clear information about the struggles at DoD. It's our largest federal agency, as I've said, employing more than 3.4 million Americans, including 1.3 million active duty service members. And in their efforts to keep our nation safe, we must ensure our service members have the most sophisticated, modernized technology and systems to eliminate financial errors. Just like we try to provide that to win wars, we need the best sort of technology that we can provide to eliminate financial errors and to streamline data entry and obtain the most effective national security we can for the tax dollars we invest. I think it's fair to say that Congress can't allow another failed audit to go by. Don't want to be here next year talking about the 8th year in a row as we move toward this 2028 mandate. It'd be good to see just a little bit of progress on that road, and personally, I've not seen it. But I want to thank all of those who've worked on this important matter since our last hearing. I thank you over and over again for your efforts to give us direction and understanding on some of this and to provide real transparency about really where all of our military spending goes. With that, Mr. Chairman, I again want to thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. I would like to reinforce for our witnesses that are today and those of the staffs that are here to recognize that Mr. Nfume and I are doing this across the entire government. It is not just the Department of Defense. It is areas where some $300 to $500 billion in our immediate past was the guess from OMB and CBO about the amount of money that went to misdirected payments. And both Mr. Nfume and I are together on this, him using not just a strong voice and working together, but us sincerely wanting to make sure that the money goes to the intended purpose and not outside of that. So, Mr. Nfume, I want to thank you. And as we said last year we would do this year, as we're saying today, we will be pleased to show up at the Pentagon, make those arrangements, and make sure that at the highest levels of the Department of Defense, they understand the work that has gone on today must be prepared and continued for 28. I'm pleased to welcome our witnesses for today. Representing the United States Marine Corps, Lieutenant General James Adams III, the gentleman, Mr. Brett Mansfield, and Mr. Asleef Khan. Lieutenant General Adams is Deputy Commandant for Programs and Resources in the United States Marine Corps. Mr. Mansfield is the Deputy Inspector for the Government for Audit at the U.S. Department of Defense Office of the Inspector General. Mr. Khan is the Director of Financial Management Assurance at the United States Government Accountability Office, GAO. And we look forward to hearing from you today, and I would ask that each of you would stand pursuant to Committee Rule 9G. The witnesses will raise their right hand to be sworn. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that each of the witnesses has answered in the affirmative. We appreciate each of you being here today and appreciate also that what the testimony that you may be seated. Thank you. We appreciate that what the testimony you give today would be along the line of making sure that this subcommittee hears you fully. With that said, we normally extend 5 minutes. I've notified each of you that if it takes you 6 or 7 minutes, we're all ears. We want you to make sure you're given the time so that this subcommittee hears from each of you. As a reminder, the buttons that are in front of you, you would push them, and then we would be able to hear you. I now recognize the distinguished gentleman, Lieutenant General Adams, for his opening statement. Gentleman's recognized.
Chairman Sessions, Ranking Member Nfume, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you very much today for the opportunity to appear before you. It is an honor to represent the United States Marine Corps in my capacity as the service's Chief Financial Officer and to speak to our financial management progress and continued challenges. I am very proud to report that the Marine Corps received an unmodified audit opinion on our fiscal year 2023 full financial statement audit and maintain that opinion for the fiscal year 2024. These are significant milestones, not only for our service, but for the Department of Defense. They reflect many years of determined effort in an enterprise-wide commitment to accountability and stewardship. I want to emphasize that while we're proud of our achievements, we do not take them for granted. While an unmodified audit opinion reinforces the Marine Corps' reputation of accountability, discipline, and leadership, it also reflects the dedication and hard work of the entire organization, including financial management professionals, acquisitions, and logistics teams. These teams continue to work tirelessly to ensure proper stewardship of resources, and their commitment remains critical to achieving and sustaining a clean audit opinion. But these achievements are not the end state. They are critical milestones along a very important journey, one that demands continued focus, sustained investment, and transformation across our financial and operational systems. Unmodified opinions are difficult to earn. They require rigorous internal controls, meticulous record keeping, and transparent financial reporting. We remain committed to continuous improvement in our financial management practices, recognizing that an unmodified opinion is hard-won but easily lost. Sustaining audit success within DoD requires recognizing that we cannot operate in silos. The Defense Department presents a complex audit environment characterized by numerous IT systems, varying operational procedures, and common deficiencies across components. To achieve and maintain DoD-wide auditability, we must prioritize streamlining, standardizing, and harnessing technology, to include emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, to free up valuable resources, simplify our business environment, and ultimately strengthen our financial management posture. One of our most persistent challenges remains the modernization of our business IT infrastructure. Much of our financial data continues to originate in legacy feeder systems that were never designed to meet audit or modern data analytic standards. These antiquated systems, some of which are decades old, require manual intervention, reconciliation, and workarounds that add complexity, introduce risk, and slow down decision-making. As the Chief Financial Officer of the Marine Corps, I see firsthand how better systems enable better outcomes, not just for auditors, but for commanders and warfighters. These individuals rely on accurate, timely information to make mission-critical decisions. The clean opinion is a clear sign of progress, but system modernization is essential to sustain and build on that progress. The achievement of auditability across the military services demands a shift in how we conduct business within DoD. A key example is the current data systems environment, which is not conducive to finalizing agency financial reports by the mid-November deadline. The Marine Corps' innovative approach to utilizing a 2-year audit to attain its first opinion is related to the challenges with the financial reporting timeline. Our approach allowed us to bypass typical mid-November audit closeout activities and dedicate that time, 2 full quarters of time, to completing comprehensive audit procedures, which would have otherwise been impossible to accomplish given the current constraints. Adhering to the mid-November deadline is unrealistic in the short term and sets us up for failure until data, systems, and financial reporting processes are streamlined. We need a realistic time frame that allows for thorough and accurate financial reporting. As the Commandant of the Marine Corps has stated, these efforts tell the American people that a dollar invested in the Marine Corps is a dollar well spent, and it is part of how we distinguish ourselves as a professional warfighting organization. Passing an audit makes us more ready to fight when our nation calls. Readiness for the warfighter means being accountable for our assets, knowing where they are, and in what condition they can be found at a moment's notice. It also means having accurate, timely, and relevant information in the hands of decision makers so that the widest determinations can be made to successfully carry out every mission. We remain committed to transparency, to reform, to delivering a more agile, accountable financial enterprise that supports the readiness and lethality of the Marine Corps. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. The gentleman, Mr. Mansfield, you're recognized.
Chairman Sessions, Ranking Member MFMA, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to discuss the Inspector General's role in auditing the DoD's financial statements in the DoD's efforts to obtain a clean audit opinion. It is my privilege to represent the dedicated oversight professionals who make up the DoD Office of Inspector General. The financial statement audits performed or overseen by the Inspector General are critically important for maintaining the public's trust, ensuring accountability, and improving operations. The 2025 financial statement audits are ongoing, so I cannot speak to their results. So I'll focus on 2024 and the previous 7 years of audit. As my prepared statement today, I provided part 1 of our annual report on understanding the results of the DoD's financial statement audits. We plan to issue part 2 next month. These reports explain the DoD's responsibility to prepare auditable financial statements and establish internal controls. It also talks to the links between financial management and operational readiness. These reports also explain the DoD OIG's responsibility to independently audit the DoD's financial statements. Fiscal year 24 marked the 7th full-scale audit of the DoD's financial statements, and for the 7th year, it resulted in a disclaimer of opinion, or as Ranking Member MFMA referred to, a failed opinion. But that does not tell the whole story. The agency-wide financial statements are a consolidation of audit statements and information from across the DoD. In addition to the agency-wide financial statement opinion, auditors issue opinions on individual reporting entities. In fiscal year 24, 11 received clean opinions, 1 received a qualified opinion, and 12 received disclaimers of opinion. These disclaimers of opinion were issued because the DoD entities continue to have unresolved accounting issues and material weaknesses. When consolidated into the agency-wide financial statements, the entity-level deficiencies resulted in the OIG identifying 28 agency-wide material weaknesses. However, individual reporting entities have made progress towards clean audit opinions. In fact, as a fellow witness stated, the Marine Corps maintained its clean opinion this year. DTRA and DLA obtained clean opinions. In addition, 14 entities either closed or downgraded at least one material weakness in fiscal year 24. While these entities, some of them are not material, but when it comes to their full contribution to the agency-wide financial statement opinion, it does mark progress. And as individual reporting entities, like the services or defense agencies, as they become better and they reduce material weaknesses and they have more solid controls over financial reporting, so will the DoD overall. Today, I want to highlight 3 themes the OIG has identified during the past 7 years of audit. First, the DoD needs accountability at all levels for financial management. Senior leaders have set the right tone at the top. However, at the individual level, personnel do not consistently understand how the work they do impacts financial statements. For example, a sergeant in a warehouse who is focused on the operational readiness may not grasp the financial impact of receiving inventory and recording inventory, or tracking customer orders and maintaining supporting documentation, and how that ultimately relates to operational readiness and knowing what you have, where it is, and the condition it's in. Second, the DoD has an extremely complex systems environment with over 4,700 systems across the DoD. More than 400 of those systems are relevant to financial management, which have at least 2,000 interfaces between them. Some of these systems have been in use since the 1950s. The systems are not always interoperable, meaning they cannot talk to each other. And many of the systems require manual processes and do not have effective controls. Third, the DoD's policies and procedures for accounting do not consistently match the capabilities of the systems they use. When implementing new systems, DoD components do not change their policies or procedures to align with the system's capabilities. Rather, they make modifications to the system to match their current procedures, negating the value of the system investment. Addressing these weaknesses requires continued effort and significant coordination within and between each DoD entity. The culture must continue to change so that all personnel realize that financial management has a direct impact on operational readiness and is everyone's business. The DoD Office of Inspector General will continue to ensure the DoD receives full and fair audits of its financial statements, to identify deficiencies and areas for improvement, and to provide actionable information and recommendations to the DoD. Our commitment to enhancing the DoD's financial health through independent oversight remains steadfast. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Timely in conclusion also. Thank you very much, Mr. Manfield. Mr. Khan, you're recognized.
Good morning, Chairman Sessions, Ranking Member Mfumi, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to once again testify on the Department of Defense financial statement audits. As you heard, there has been some progress since our last update. The tone at the top continues to be supportive of the audit effort with the goal of achieving an opinion by 2028. This is one of Secretary Heskett's 3 priorities. The audit uncovers weaknesses in DoD management systems, improves coordination, and guides better decision-making, and it has led to positive results, both financial and operational. It has also identified vulnerabilities which require heightened attention by DoD management. Today, I would like to highlight 2 key items. The expansion of DoD financial management high-risk area to include fraud risk management, and then the next steps in DoD's audit approach to reaching auditability. First, effective fraud risk management is essential to protecting the resources entrusted to the department. The lack of an effective fraud risk management capacity, combined with the identified material weaknesses, compounds DoD's failures to establish a strong financial management internal control environment. This condition increases opportunities for fraud against the department's vast resources. DoD spends over $1 trillion annually. It obligated over $450 billion for contracting in fiscal year 2023, making it the largest contracting agency in the federal government. The scope and scale of DoD's financial activity makes it inherently susceptible to fraud. For fiscal year 2017 through 24, DoD themselves reported over $10 billion in confirmed fraud. The actual fraud is likely much higher, as the full scale of fraud is not known. Now to my second point, the next steps in DoD's approach to auditability. Sound financial management processes are critical to supporting DoD's mission, ensuring its financial resources are being spent wisely, and that there are controls in place to minimize fraud, waste, and abuse. It also helps ensure DoD has reliable information on what supplies and assets it has, where they're located, so the department can achieve its mission effectively and efficiently. As a first step to auditability, DoD will need to have reliable data for preparing its financial statements to successfully pass the audit. The Marine Corps was able to achieve its first opinion through effective strategic planning and managing milestones. They augmented the capabilities of the new General Ledger System, the DAI, with manual, labor-intensive methods, which smaller agencies previously used to obtain a clean audit opinion. This strategy involves tracking transactions piecemeal and relying on manual workarounds for record keeping, as the feeder systems and underlying controls are unreliable. The goal of an effective financial management system is to provide reliable information on a timely basis for decision-making. It's yet unclear for other larger DoD components if they may successfully employ the Marine Corps approach. But what is clear, in order to succeed, the department must be realistic of the resource needs to prepare auditable financial statements and coordinate detailed planning, enforce timelines, and manage complexity. To reap long-term benefits and meet the intent of producing financial statements, DoD must also strengthen internal controls and modernize systems to cut fraud risk and eliminate inefficient workarounds. DoD must build a repeatable, reliable financial management process that consistently generates timely, accurate data to support operations and strengthen national defense. And if Congress were to monitor milestones, ensure accountability, and adapt where necessary, without affecting the 2028 audit goal, it would go a long way towards helping the department achieve auditability and build that repeatable financial management process. My written statement provides much more detail on these matters. I'm able to address your questions about them and on the broader subjects of DoD financial management and the benefits of financial statement auditability. Thank you once again for the opportunity to testify. I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Ms. Khan, thank you very much. All three of you completed the task well within the time frame, and that I appreciate. We have a number of members who were spread out, not only on the Democratic side, but the Republican side. And so today we will attempt to take those members as they appear. I would first offer time to the distinguished gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Burchett. Gentleman's recognized.
When you said distinguished and gentleman, I didn't look up, but then when you said Tennessee.
Yes, sir.
I realized you were
Yes,
talking about me, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Mafumi. Appreciate y'all being my friend. Have a few questions. Mr. Mansfield, is DOD's fiscal year 26 budget going to be higher than fiscal year 25's budget?
That is my understanding, yes.
And how much of that is spending is mandatory and how much is discretionary?
The vast majority is discretionary.
The spending has increased, but I assume that DOD still has not completed a clean audit. Is that correct?
Correct.
Why is the Marine Corps able to complete a clean audit, but no one else at the Pentagon is?
So I think it goes back to some of what my fellow witnesses were talking about. It was a deliberate and long-term effort to get to that point.
To get to the point of not being able to pass an audit?
Being able to pass an audit. So there was about a 3-year cycle. It was a 2-year audit, but they capitalized on a lot of work that was performed in previous financial statement audits to look at accountability and how testing results were coming out. They implemented a new system, DAI, which has some inherent controls within it. And then they validated the information within that through a substantive testing effort. So it was a very labor-intensive effort, taking actually a little over 2 years. It was actually extended past the November deadline into, I think, February, in order to actually get the full financial statement audit testing completed. So it was a deliberate and kind of, I think, very manual, what I refer to as a brute force auditing approach. It's not your standard approach of doing internal control testing.
I see part of our problem here is we're preaching to the choir. 8 years, they have not passed an audit. They can't account for over $500 billion. This is the Pentagon, not the Marine Corps. I mean, $500 billion, sir, is an aircraft carrier. Somewhere in the Pentagon, we've lost an aircraft carrier. And that hurts me because I come from this conservative area. My daddy fought in the 1st Marine Division. His colonel was Chesty Puller. My mama lost her oldest brother fighting the Nazis. My wife is a widow, and the biological father of my child was a master chief on a Navy sub. So the military runs very deep in my family, and patriotism does as well. But when we continue to feed this insatiable diet of waste and abuse, it continues to, I think, weaken us from a fiscal standpoint and a military standpoint. We continue down this path of an antiquated system where we vote for huge bloated budgets for powerful members of Congress, and we have programs, apparatus, machinery, everything imaginable that gets mothballed the day we put it out. And Mr. Chairman, that has got to stop. We have got to educate the public, and they need to be as angry as I am about this, because we cannot continue down this path. I think we're endangering our military. We're endangering our men and women. Daddy used to say, he was quoting somebody else, but he said, old men make decisions and young men die. And when we're sitting here having $500 million aircraft being proposed and we're putting out, we're allowing the Chinese to make the microchips for them that could possibly turn off some of those aircraft mid-flight, we've been told. This is not just some conspiracy theory that is talked about. And we continue down this path of greed, and when we have members of this body that profit from this, and they're allowed to do individual stock trades and continue down this. The public does not trust us, and dadgummit, they ought not trust us. We have not been good stewards of their money. This is going to continue until we get off our high horse and realize what the heck is going on. And what is going on right now is we're allowing people to steal from us because we're hogs at the trough. Congress is hogs at the trough, and I'm convinced of that. You want to follow the dadgum money trail, it goes right back to Congress. And someday I hope some members of Congress are let out of here in handcuffs because of that. Because these men, they're the ones having to come out and defend the indefensible. And I want to salute the Marine Corps and your all's great heritage. And my mama said after Daddy died, if Daddy hadn't been able to go fight in that war, she probably couldn't have been able to live with him because he loved this country and he loved the Corps. He loved Chesty Puller as well, but that goes a lot deeper. So thank y'all. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I went to preaching. I didn't even have we'll have a special love offering when this is all over with. We didn't even have an altar call, but thank you for allowing me to indulge, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. Distinguished gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know there are other members. I'm going to just waive my time right now so that you can start the process of acknowledging them. I do want to thank the gentleman who just spoke for always speaking real and from the heart in a very basic way to underscore the work of this committee and the challenge to change the status quo. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. The distinguished gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized, Mrs. Fox.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Mansfield, in 2024, the DoD Office of Inspector General reported that many of DoD's financial management systems remain non-compliant with statutory standards for accurate, reliable, and timely information. Although DoD aims to achieve compliance by fiscal year 2028, the OIG found its plans insufficiently aggressive, citing delays in retiring outdated systems. The OIG recommended expediting the retirement and replacement of 23 systems, potentially saving nearly $728 million in future funding. Mr. Mansfield, in your opinion, why is the Department of Defense not being more aggressive in retiring financial systems that are not cost-effective and that are not compliant with statutory requirements?
It's a complex storyline. So if you think about the number of systems they have.
Simplify it we have short time.
No, so what I'm saying is there's a lot of systems. And in order to replace, if you have 400 systems that you're relying upon, to replace all of those at one point in time is very difficult. And so what the department hasn't done, I don't think the best job of, is prioritizing which systems to replace, those systems that have the biggest impact on the department. So if you think about the most material portions of the financial statements and the systems relied upon for that, prioritizing those and making real decisions on which systems are going to be used in the long term. So identifying those enterprise resource management systems they want to use across the board and requiring use of those, and stop letting individual entities make their own decisions on the systems they use. There needs to be more of a strategic approach to that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Khan, according to GAO, the Navy identified 14 legacy systems that it plans to retire, which would save the department approximately $103 million. Are the other branches also running legacy systems that would be more cost-effective to eliminate? And how many legacy systems are there that are costing the branches and the DoD money to use?
Yes, there are other components which are running legacy systems which are not producing reliable information. I don't have a number with me right now. I will get that to you for the record.
Okay. And what prevents the military services from using the same financial systems?
In part, they've got different requirements. It's big, complex. They have to do this in stages. First, they have to do individual offices, components. But it's the scale and their different practices which keeps them using one system for the entire department.
Another question, Mr. Khan. A DoD IG audit of financial improvements and audit remediation contracts for the military components found that from fiscal year 2018 to fiscal year 2022, the DoD spent approximately $4 billion on audit remediation and support with the goal of obtaining a clean audit, but that the department made minimal progress to correct its financial management. What specifically was the money spent on, and how does $4 billion yield only minimal progress for achieving a clean audit?
Most of the money went for the project planning and putting in the basics of a system so they could be integrated with the existing feeder systems that go into the entire component. Results were achieved, but it's primarily getting the data cleaned so they can be reliable to pass the test of an audit, and that takes time.
Did we get our money's worth, yes or no?
It's difficult to say.
Ms. Fox, I'd like to submit that, since we produced that report, I would say I don't think we got our money's worth.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Khan, I'm very concerned about the lack of fiscal responsibility we've historically seen at the Department of Defense. As you know, Congress has directed the department to have a clean audit option by 2028. To maintain public trust and accountability as the administration continues to cut costs, the department must ensure the independence of its outside auditors, whose mission is to objectively evaluate waste, fraud, and abuse. Mr. Khan, what steps is the department taking to ensure its outside auditors are able to help the department achieve a credible, clean audit?
The outside auditors have been vetted by the DoDIG. There are the companies which go through a pretty lengthy procurement process. The audit firms, these are CPA firms who have been registered as such. They also go through peer review. So their reports, whether it's in the federal sector, state and local sector, or private sector, they've been peer reviewed by other CPA firms to make sure they meet auditing standards and professional standards.
But they're not being compromised by the DOD as they do the audits. They're allowed complete independence, are they?
Yes, as far as we can tell, they are independent. They are not compromised by management or anything I can see from where we are.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. I want to thank the gentlewoman for coming back. I know she is busy, and I know we have other members that are busy too. Now I would like to yield to distinguished gentlewoman from the state of Washington, Ms. Randall. Gentlewoman's recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. You know, like the gentleman from Tennessee, I come from a family with a strong military tradition, including a grandfather who survived pretty heavy combat in the Korean War. I also represent Naval Base Kitsap and the Intermediate Maintenance Facility, and my neighbors know how important it is that our Department of Defense is operating at the highest possible level, that we are efficient with taxpayer dollars, and that we are effective with our delivery of the mission. Mr. Khan, GAO has made many recommendations for DoD on financial management so that we won't be in this position with this big graphic that Mr. Mfume had in the future. Which of these recommendations could have the greatest impact on DoD's efforts to modernize its financial system?
Thank you for that question, Congresswoman Randall. The key that comes to mind is DoD's planning and their managing their milestones. Those are the key issues which keeps DoD having to move their timelines. They need to be more forceful in maintaining their timelines, and the way they can do that is better planning to have more granular information with interim milestones, so they're not reaching the end of time and then realizing that all the steps have not been completed. The other one, if I may touch on very quickly, is the tone at the top needs to be continue.
I'm going to switch over to the other hearing. Let's see if we can just get it just started a minute ago, so we're on a minute delay.
Welcome, everyone, to this meeting. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. We are here today to discuss an issue that is becoming increasingly urgent, the future of U.S. manufacturing. The United States is facing a need that it has never faced before, the need to shake off and reverse its fall as the global leader in manufacturing. We won the Second World War not just because our generals were great leaders and strategists, and not just because we put so many heroic men and women on the field of battle and in support, but because we manufactured our enemies into oblivion. The United States held approximately 40% of the globe's manufacturing in 1941. After Pearl Harbor, that vast manufacturing power became the free world's arsenal for democracy. For every German tank manufactured, we produced 4 tanks. For every merchant ship tonnage that the Japanese built, we produced 8. For every aircraft carrier the Japanese deployed, we launched 3. For every plane that combined Axis powers built, we by ourselves manufactured 1.5 planes. Before the war, the U.S. manufactured less than 3,000 planes, but by the end, we had a force of 300,000 planes. Overwhelming material was pivotal to our winning the war, and the United States left World War II as the most wealthy and powerful nation on earth, in very large part because of our manufacturing prowess. Yet, as time marched on and the good post-war times rolled, we began to forget how important our capacity to manufacture and innovate was to making and keeping America great. And as the Cold War ended and we entered the end of history era, unprecedented globalization took hold. And in that moment, instead of embracing new technologies or innovating in the manufacturing industry, we sold off our manufacturing birthright to other countries. A vast amount of what was once American manufacturing was shipped off to foreign manufacturing. In the end, we lost our manufacturing base. And that was not just because the U.S. leaders supported globalization, it was also because we overregulated existing manufacturing and imposed enormous obstacles to the permitting of new manufacturing. This strangled possibilities for new growth and further encouraged U.S. manufacturers to move their manufacturing overseas. In the end, the United States' share of global manufacturing fell from 40% that it was in 1950s to 16% as a share that we hold today. We lost millions of skilled labor jobs. The middle class has shrank, and communities across America have been harmed. Filling the void of the U.S. was China. China's share of global manufacturing increased at an exponential rate. China leaned in heavily on cheap labor, slave labor, and suicide-inducing labor conditions to achieve the manufacturing share that it possesses today. And China's position as the current world leader in manufacturing poses economic, military, and national security threats to the United States. Nevertheless, there is hope that we are approaching an American industrial renaissance. Under President Trump, the United States has the technology, the capital, and the political will to reshore manufacturing stateside. Congressional and executive branch efforts to decrease unnecessary regulatory burdens and streamline permitting processes will encourage reshoring. And by adopting automation and artificial intelligence, the United States can and will multiply the economic output of the average American worker exponentially. Salaries will rise as costs of goods stay low. Skilled labor and manufacturing employment that was extinguished due to globalization will return. The middle class will expand again, and we can and will bring manufacturing back to the United States. And with that, I yield to Ranking Member Frost for his opening statement.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here this morning. Since the 1980s, the United States has faced a decline in manufacturing jobs that has left many workers feeling forgotten and turned away by many once thriving communities into ghost towns. Democrats are united in wanting to bring more good, high-paying manufacturing jobs to these communities and making sure America is leading the way in strategically significant manufacturing sectors of the future. But President Trump's disaster tariff plan, which is estimated to increase costs to American households by $4,900 a year, is not the solution. During the Biden administration, the Democrats' Made in America agenda resulted in legislation like the CHIPS and Science Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and Democrats drafted this legislation with Republicans in a bipartisan way, and with the vital input of manufacturing workers, employers, and impacted communities. This legislation jump-started industry, helping to create more than 700,000 manufacturing jobs in the United States and secure over $1 trillion in planned investments. Our country has not seen this much new factory construction in half a century. This legislation and these investments created during the Biden administration should continue to pay off, creating over 200,000 more jobs each year going forward, assuming
I
no
usually
new
don't
policies
interrupt, but the
stifle that growth.
lies are just
There's still so much to do
so
and
hard
to
to
support
ignore.
in terms of domestic manufacturing and creating good-paying, safe, and
The
affordable
Democrats
products here
sent
in
the
America
jobs
while
overseas in
protecting
the
our
90s
environment.
with NAFTA.
I'm here to
if
work
not
with anyone, regardless
mistaken.
of
I
political
mean, let's
affiliation,
fact
to
check
continue
myself
this
here.
work. But I'm also concerned that instead of advancing the progress we've made over the last several years, we're going to trend in the opposite direction due to Trump's irrational blanket tariff policy. While Democrats' legislative achievements in manufacturing have created, again, more than 700,000 manufacturing jobs, Trump's chaotic tariffs are expected to eliminate 770,000 jobs in 2025 alone. Tariffs are an important tool, when used carefully and intelligently, can help the American worker. But from slashing services at the VA to accidentally encouraging our air traffic controllers to resign and firing the essential workers that maintain our nuclear weapon stockpile, deporting American citizens, and discussing sensitive military operations on signal, careful and intelligent does not describe this administration, and that is the case with their tariff policy as well. Investors are pulling back from doing business in America, which impacts critical industries and prevents companies from actually starting new businesses to make goods here in the United States. Hardworking Americans are seeing a tanking stock market tank, widespread firing, and are concerned about what's to come. I've heard from countless Central Floridians in my community who have fears. David, an Orlando retiree, has lost 20% of his 401k in the last 2 months. Patricia, an Orlando resident, wrote in saying she cannot make improvements to her home with the recent instability of the economy. And Delia, who also wrote into our office, a Winter Park working person, said she won't be able to afford the tariff-driven increase on the cost of foods, housing, medicine, and other things as well. We know there's a better way. The laws we led created the stability that manufacturers need to create jobs, and we worked to make sure that they were jobs that Americans want and deserve, safe jobs that offer financial security and stability. Democrats increased both worker safety protections and worker safety inspections while making good wages a key component to the CHIPS and Science awards. The Democrat-led National Labor Relations Board cracked down on law-breaking corporations and fortified workers' right to organize. As we know, in 2023, President Biden became the first sitting U.S. president to ever walk a picket line when he marched with striking United Auto Worker members in Michigan. The president, Donald Trump, worked aggressively to put corporate profits over workers' rights during his last term, and he's doing it again. This is why we're going to see in the second term, just like happened in the first term, that wealth inequality in this country will continue to rise. For starters, he attacked the National Labor Relations Board and its mission of defending workers' rights, illegally fired the one Democratic board member, like in his first term, and he's stuffing the board with anti-worker people. Elon Musk even called the NLRB unconstitutional, while Trump has praised Musk for firing striking workers. The president is also looking at repealing sick leave, minimum wage, and overtime protections for some categories of workers. While making working conditions worse, he has also made it less safe. During his first term, Trump had the fewest OSHA safety inspectors ever, and he's already fired 2/3 of the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health workforce since retaking office. His assault on workers' rights and safety does not stop at the factory gate, but it follows workers at home as well. And this is important because we can't talk about bringing manufacturing jobs in this industry back to America without ensuring that we empower and protect the American worker. It's probably the most important part of this conversation, and Democrats are going to ensure that the American worker is front and center here. I look forward to working with my colleagues from both parties, as well as workers, labor representatives, private industry, to continue the manufacturing boom that was started by Democrats over the past 4 years. But this effort must never be at the expense of safety, dignity, and prosperity of the American worker. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. I'm pleased to welcome our panel of expert witnesses who each bring experience and expertise that will be valuable for today's discussion on manufacturing. I'd first like to welcome Chris Power from Hadrian, who serves as the company's Chief Executive Officer. Next, we have Kevin Zinger, who is a founder of Divergent and currently serves as its Executive Chairman. Next, we have Austin Bishop, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the New American Industrial Alliance. And lastly, we have Adam Hirsch, who serves as a senior economist at the Economic Policy Institute. Thank you each for being here. And with that, I would ask everyone to stand. Not you. Okay, pursuant to the committee rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise their right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witnesses answered in the affirmative. You may be seated. We appreciate you being here today. We look forward to your testimony. Let me remind you that we have read your written statement, and it will appear in full in the hearing record. Please limit your oral arguments to 5 minutes. It's very simple. The light in front of you will turn yellow when you have 1 minute left, and then when it's red, your time has expired. As a reminder, please press the button, and often people do not know to speak directly into the microphone. And so this is being covered on C-SPAN, and we want the American people to hear what you have to say. And with that, I recognize Mr. Power for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Bellinson and Ranking Member Frost and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to appear here today. I came to this country from Australia 5 years ago purely because I recognized that, as the chairman quite rightly said, we're past the end of history Fukuyama phase. And what we've done to the United States is deindustrialize the country over the last 40 years, some through our own mistakes and some through forcible Chinese policy, where they're using aggressive subsidies to pull out critical manufacturing capability from offshore. And what I recognized before I came here to make as big of an impact on the country as possible is that, you know, Americans treat manufacturing as a kind of globalism-free trade over the last 40 years, and China has quite rightly treated it as a strategic capability of being able to make things onshore. And the chairman was quite right in that what won World War II was our ability to pivot the commercial manufacturing base into the defense base when it really mattered. And over the last 40 years, we've offshored everything that wasn't bolted down to the defense industrial base by regulations like ITAR. So we're in a real crisis now. And the impact of that both the chairman and ranking member Frost were quite right, is that it decimated the middle class, it decimated the American manufacturing workforce, and culturally that means, you know, no one wants to work in manufacturing, because why would you sign up your son or daughter to go into an industry that's in declining? So we've created this real crisis for ourselves, and now that China is a real global threat, you know, we're in very much crisis mode. So I came here to make a difference in that, and I'll provide some specific recommendations. But in reality, what this is all about is the highly skilled American workforce. And for the last 40 years, because of those declining jobs, because the revenue has gone out of the country, there are less factories, there are less good jobs. And now we're at a point where most of the skilled American workforce is in their late 50s and early 60s. And by skilled, I mean incredibly highly skilled, especially in a defense industrial base. It normally takes 10 to 20 years to train someone. These are very highly paid jobs at defense primes or subcontractors to the defense primes that are critical to remain onshore. But because of that demographic load, you've got most of the workforce aging out across the next decade. As people get older and they tire, and we are losing their knowledge and skills with them, and we are forgetting as a country to manufacture, and it is all about the people on the ground floor that are getting the job day in, day out. And they are just retiring faster and faster and faster. So what my company does, Hadrian, we're the fastest growing manufacturer in the United States, is we build autonomous AI-driven factories where we're not replacing people, but we are making the American workforce 10 times more efficient so that we can compete globally while creating new and advanced jobs along the way. And the only way to reindustrialize this country is to leapfrog the Chinese system, which has been built on the back of slave labor conditions, enormous CCP policy-led energy subsidies, raw material subsidies, that are simply not a level playing field with American innovation. So what our company is built to do is build and rapidly scale United States factories that are software and robotics first, that do not replace people, but let them be 10 times more productive, and also simplify things so that 100% of our workforce now have never set foot inside a factory before they join our company. We can train them in 30 days in not 10 to 20 years. And what that means is that there's new types of jobs coming online that are higher paid, they're better, friendlier conditions, and it allows us to scale with the demand that the country needs, especially in critical areas like shipbuilding and munitions, where the number one problem that you'll hear from program officers or other actors in the shipbuilding space is, I simply cannot, you could give me $1 billion, I simply cannot hire enough welders. They no longer exist in the country. There simply aren't enough machinists or quality inspectors in the country. And the only way to do that, to meet the national mission of both reindustrializing the country to compete globally in this new world order where we are disconnecting from the Chinese economy, and to meet the emerging needs of the defense industrial base, the only way to do that is build factories that give the American workforce superpowers and have them have better jobs, more highly paid jobs that are robotics and software first, and allow us to scale as a country by leapfrogging China with what America is best at. We still have global leadership in software, AI, and robotics, and the point of building these advanced factories is to give the American workforce superpowers so that we can scale as a country and compete globally without falling into the trap of low-paid jobs or simply giving up the farm and not being a manufacturing superpower anymore, which is critically important. There's two critical points that are in my testimony, but I would like to reinforce, given that the time is up. One is that much of our spend that is going to China is through defense primes or other manufacturers in the US that get paid by the federal government, but end up offshoring a big chunk of their supply chain. One thing that you would immediately create millions and millions of jobs and demand in the country is by forcing a statement that if you get paid in America, you must have your supply chain and make it in America, without us subsidizing the competitive landscape. And the second thing that I'd like to encourage everyone to think about, whether it's a tariff policy or other policy, is that we have to create an even playing field with China. Our energy cost and our raw materials cost, not to mention labor subsidies, are 10 times greater than China. So to compete globally, we have to find strategic ways to give the American manufacturers a level playing field with the egregious CCP subsidies that get put on core inputs to manufacturing like energy and raw materials cost. Thank you for the time.
There we go.
Thank you. And I think the yellow light turns on. We have 30 seconds left, so just as reference. I now recognize Mr. Zinger for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ranking Member and distinguished members of the committee for the opportunity to testify here today. I'm representing my company, Divergent, and I'm also here as someone who has spent a lifetime believing in America's capacity to lead. I grew up working class in Cleveland, an industrial city that once took great pride in helping power the American economy. Football helped me earn a college education as the first in my family to go to school, and I later served as a U.S. Marine Corps infantryman before becoming an inventor and technology entrepreneur. What drives me is the belief that this country, more than any other, has the ingenuity, the grit, and the values to lead the world in innovation and in actually creating things. I founded Divergent because I saw what happened to America's industrial core. We didn't just outsource jobs. We outsourced our key core national strength. We weakened our supply chains to save a buck in the short run, both in industry and in Silicon Valley. We ignored the needs of our workers and our communities. We gave China the lead, and through turning over our supply chain to them, we gave them in plain sight hidden control of our national security and our economic security. Now we need a fix. This can't be done through traditional incremental steps or going back to old technology. We must fundamentally rethink manufacturing and the factory itself. That's why Divergent was built from a clean sheet of paper. We started with what the future demands today. Divergent developed the world's first fully integrated digital industrial system by combining together in one system generative design, additive manufacturing, advanced materials, and robotics. We design, print, and assemble high-performance structures at industrial volumes faster and with greater flexibility than ever before in the history of the planet. It is today fully operational, proven across aerospace, defense, and automotive platforms, and it is entirely built and based here in the United States. We've proven the system at scale, delivering components for fighter jets, hypersonics, and space systems. We are currently working with every major U.S. defense prime and with some of the most demanding commercial auto companies in the world, including Aston Martin, McLaren, Mercedes, and Bugatti. These are production programs with cars out on the road today, with AI-designed 3D printed structures built here in the United States. These companies that I mentioned do not compromise on quality, safety, and precision. A depleted munitions stockpile, huge sustainment backlogs, and obsolete parts are plaguing the Defense Department. Divergent is ready to step in now and scale production with a scale-ready digital factory system. Faster, more resilient, and at a far lower cost to the taxpayer. Now think ahead, a nationwide network of next-generation American families across and can be in virtually every state of the union that don't just build resilience, they rebuild America's industry. This isn't one factory making one product. It's factories, each able to serve many industries, produce any parts, and support hundreds of companies across the country. That's what Divergent enables. That's how we upskill the American workforce. That's how we take jobs back from China and bring them back home under standards that uphold human rights and deliver good wages. This is about more than advanced technology. It's about responsibility and resilience. It's about rebuilding an industrial base that is accountable to the nation it serves, because we've seen what happens when fragile global supply chains break, whether in a pandemic or in war. After the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, President Kennedy went to Dr. von Braun, then the space director of NASA, and asked how the U.S. could catch up. Wernher von Braun said, "Mr. President, we won't catch up to them in Earth orbit. We need to beat them to the moon." The good news is, in the last decade, we've done that moonshot, and we now have a fully digital factory that is ready to scale. Divergent is proof of what is possible when innovation is unleashed. Now think about what we could achieve if we align policy, capital, and the will to accelerate this innovative transformation. This is our chance to reindustrialize with purpose. Let's not only play defense, let's play offense. Let's not only reshore manufacturing over the coming years, let's leapfrog China and disrupt them with proven technology. Let's lead again, and let's do it in a way that builds a more vibrant, secure, and equitable America. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Bishop for his opening statement.
Chairman Burleson, Ranking Member Frost, and the members of the committee, thank you again for the opportunity to testify today. We are at a pivotal moment in American history that demands urgency, imagination, and national unity. The question before us is not whether America can lead in the world in cutting-edge production again, but whether we choose to. So reindustrialization is not about nostalgia or recreating a past economy, but about building a dynamic, future-facing industrial base that strengthens national security, revives economic mobility for working Americans, and reclaims American leadership in critical sectors. This is a nonpartisan challenge and a once-in-a-generation opportunity. As Ranking Member said, workforce is at the front of this. I mean, I'm a guy from Cleveland, Ohio as well, and over the decades, that I grew up there, and certainly the decades leading up to that, I wish that there was this much interest in ensuring that our industrial base stayed onshore. And what we saw over those few decades is something that we have a chance to reverse going into the future. You know, during COVID-19, that pandemic exposed a really painful truth, which is our over-reliance on globalized supply chains has left American families vulnerable and our economy brittle. Basic goods, from personal protective equipment to microchips, became scarce almost overnight. Moms in the Midwest couldn't get baby formula because the Suez Canal was blocked, an absurdity that everyone must admit reveals a massive weakness created by surrendering sovereignty over where and how things are produced. Resilience on far-flung manufacturing hubs, particularly in Asia, has caused a profound loss of confidence in our system's resilience. We are all worse off in a world where the West cannot manufacture certain goods in abundance. And that reality forces us to rely on the good graces of distant powers to meet our needs. It weakens our military's ability to deter aggression and to defend its allies, and deprives millions of Americans in every state of stable, high-productive employment in high-tech industries. Moreover, this vulnerability was not accidental. Deindustrialization was a choice resulting from bad policy decision and flawed ideologies that prioritized short-term cost savings over long-term national strength and discouraged investment in capital-intensive industries. Cheap labor abroad and foreign subsidization, combined with burdensome regulations and protracted permitting processes, has hollowed out our domestic manufacturing base. We socialized the cost and privatized the gains, as entire cities were reduced to rusty shells of their former selves while the S&P made record highs. We should remember that the pandemic is a warning shot. We cannot entrust our prosperity to fragile, distant supply chains. Further compounding this is the reality that China is an increasingly hostile geopolitical rival and sits at the center of many global supply chains. Today, the United States depends heavily on China for critical minerals, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, ships. Everyone in this room knows this at this point. These supply chains could collapse overnight in the event of a conflict or even heightened tensions. We must be clear-eyed. Economic dependency is a strategic vulnerability. If we cannot produce the essentials of modern life within our own borders, we are not truly sovereign. Onshoring critical industries is not simply an economic imperative, but a national security mandate. Bringing manufacturing home is also not about reliving the past. It's about forging a better future. The future has to look like the future. I say this again as a guy whose city is maybe most famous for its rivers catching on fire. We are no fans of that. The old industrial jobs of the 20th century were the foundation of the American middle class, providing millions with good wages, dignity, and upward mobility. Since manufacturing's share of the GDP declined from 30% in the 1950s to just 11 or 12% today, we have witnessed the undeniable hollowing out of our middle class. However, manufacturing jobs of tomorrow will not look like the jobs of the past. They'll be extensions of the advanced manufacturing jobs that we already have here in America at companies like some of my colleagues here, highly skilled, technologically advanced careers working with robotics, precision manufacturing, AI logistics, and more. Onshore companies will also need workers for sales, construction, management, maintenance. This represents millions and millions of jobs, many of which do not require four-year degrees. By investing in a modern industrial base, we can rebuild a middle class that is not only larger, but is better equipped for the demands of the 21st century. Finally, onshoring manufacturing will ignite innovation across our economy. Historically, industrial leadership has been inseparable from technological leadership. When we manufacture, we invent. When we lose production capabilities, we lose the ability to innovate. Today, America lags in critical manufacturing R&D areas, from battery production to advanced materials to microfabrication. By bringing industry back home, we will secure our supply chains and unlock new frontiers of research, entrepreneurship, and invention. The average American will benefit far more from reliable access to goods in a healthy, more dynamic economy where workers share more directly in the nation's growth and prosperity. Finally, reindustrialization is not about going backwards. It's about moving America forwards. It's about making America safer, more prosperous, and more unified. It's about empowering the next generation of American workers with the tools to build a better future. Thank you again for the opportunity. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Hirsch for his opening statement.
Chair Burleson, Ranking Member Frost, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today. My name is Adam Hirsch, and I'm a senior economist at the Economic Policy Institute, where I study trade, industrial policy, manufacturing, and the U.S.-China economic relationship. Today's hearing covers an important topic for legislators. Manufacturing is a special and economically critical activity, and I have to say I agree with most of what I've heard from my co-panelists here about the causes of its long-term decline. While we're having a timely discussion, the premise for this hearing is somewhat out of date. The previous administration had already ignited a renaissance in key manufacturing industries. 2024 saw the highest U.S. manufacturing investment in our history. 2023 was the next highest year. This was achieved with an embrace of industrial policy that incentivized U.S. manufacturing and defended against unfair and mercantilist practices from our trading partners. Now, in less than 100 days, the current administration has squandered this progress with policymaking chaos, senseless cuts to critical and effective government programs and investments, and an indiscriminate, non-strategic approach to trade policy. Economic indicators now for the manufacturing sector outlook are hitting near or at their lowest levels in recorded history, and economic policy uncertainty is at its highest level ever. To be sure, industrial policies begun under President Biden left room for improvement, but President Trump is not doing this. He's not so much throwing the baby out with the bathwater as he is demolishing the entire bathroom. As a nation, this will leave us all poorer, more dependent on foreign technology leadership, and more exposed to supply chain disruptions. There is another way forward. It is not going back to the failed trade policies that brought us here, but it is also not continuing with the chaotic, indiscriminate, and non-strategic tariff policies we've seen for the past 3 months. Nor will we get there with corporate tax cuts and deregulation. The path forward is to recognize the emerging consensus in economics that industrial policy is both feasible and effective, and if we heed its recommendations for how and when it can succeed. I provide some detail of this in my written testimony. But I'll summarize here by saying the economy is rife with market failures that call for strong public sector interventions and scientific research and coordination of economic stakeholders. Research finds that public investments in science yield a return on investment of between 140 and 210%. To put it in comparison, the long-run average return for the S&P 500 is less than 10%. Public research complements and enhances private sector development. For example, my co-panelists here are no doubt impressive and even visionary entrepreneurs, but they stand on the shoulders of 3D printing technology that was developed by a government scientist in a public research center in Japan. In addition to research, policymakers should identify priority industries for economic and national security importance, analyze the unique webs of complementary investments required to succeed in those industries, and devise coordination strategies specific to each application. This is how China's BYD became the world's #1 electric vehicle manufacturer. They didn't do it by stealing U.S. technology. We don't have that technology here. Succeeding at industrial policy requires substantial state capacity, which the so-called Department of Government Efficiency is rapidly dismantling. When China began its economic reforms in the 1980s, it did not cut its bureaucracy. It ousted the political hacks and added millions more bureaucrats, scientists, engineers, management professionals. There is no successful implementation of industrial policy in world history where state capacity is in decline. Finally, let me talk about manufacturing jobs. These were not always good jobs. They only became good jobs when unionization achieved high density. As manufacturing unions have declined, so has manufacturing job quality. We will not restore manufacturing jobs to anything like the levels in America's economic heyday, but we can ensure that the jobs we create everywhere in the economy provide dignity and decent pay. Thank you. I look forward to our questions.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Perry from Pennsylvania for 5 minutes of questions.
I thank the chairman. Mr. Bishop, it's estimated that the U.S. has lost 3.7 million jobs since 2001, largely due to Chinese illegal trade practices. You know, they bypassed the trade rules, as you know, through shell companies, backdoor tactics. They steal protected American intellectual property. and then they use the products to undercut American sales. Since 1981, the U.S. federal government, that's what China does, right? But since 1981, our government has issued at least one manufacturing-related regulation per week since 1981. And that's a long list of regulations, which is, you know, quite honestly, it's played into China's hands, bringing our manufacturing to a standstill, which is what they love. Do you have any recommendations for where to start with onshore manufacturing deregulate? Like, where do we start? What's the highest priority? And then give us like a roadmap, if you have one, about how to deal with that.
Thank you for the question. I mean, to this point, I mean, just the example of BYD that just came up, they didn't steal the technology for sure, but they were able to leapfrog us over the last 5-6 years, literally because American ex-auto executives and consultants went over and gave them the playbook. I know this because I know a number of these ex-executives and these consultants. And one of the reasons that they're able to take ideas and then turn them into a reality a lot faster is on the regulatory front. To your point, I think one of the things that we should be aiming the highest at, and is certainly on everyone's mind right now, is NEPA regulation. And again, as I said, the town that I'm from had a lot of rivers catching on fire in the 1970s. I'm for sure no fan of that, but I think we are so far away from where the pendulum has swung from those days to where now we have law firms making hundreds of millions of dollars a year just doing NEPA compliance regulation. If I had one thing to focus on, I think it would be a more common sense regulatory regime that is modern and built for the century that we're in, rather than something that was built in the 1970s.
Well, as a person who's in the manufacturing business, I think on this committee, would like your specific recommendations on where to start, whether that's NEPA or something else, some things that are specific that plague us. Look, we got a lot of work to do, right? One a week since 1981. Obviously, have a lot of work to do, but we need to start with some kind of prioritization and then get after it. Mr. Power, China accounted for almost 15% of all U.S. imports in 2023. It's also the largest foreign supplier of critical technologies for the Department of Defense. Greg Hayes, the CEO of Raytheon, stated that it would be impossible for him to decouple from China due to the company's reliance on thousands of Chinese suppliers. Meanwhile, the Communist Party of China considers the United States of America and its businesses not strategic adversaries, not strategic competitors, but the enemy. What are the real-world implications as you see them for America's warfighting capabilities if we don't change course?
Thank you for the question, sir. In my opinion, we're on a 5 to 8 year clock with China threatening Taiwan. And in the current state of the vast majority of defense manufacturing, these supply chains are so intermingled with rare earth minerals that produce magnets.
Don't call them rare earth. They're not rare. They're critical, but they're not rare. There's plenty of them in this country. We're just not allowed to go get them, but carry on.
That is correct, sir. I appreciate the clarification. They are so intermingled that even, I'll give you a practical example, is there's some components on the F-35 program that the DoD gave an exception to so that I think it was a magnet, is in the Chinese supply chain. And it's not just one part, it's not like a class of things like magnets, it's all over the place. And yes, it will take time to decouple. It is not a trivial thing to do. But in my mind, the only thing to do is pass legislation that says if you're getting paid in America, you have to have your whole supply chain in America and let the economic system correct. Because at this point, they could shut off a lot of our critical programs, not to mention semiconductors, and we'd be flying completely blind, and we would simply not have the productive capacity to make it past the first 2 weeks of a conflict.
Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Frost for his 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really glad that my Republican colleagues want to continue the Democratic historic efforts to rebuild America's manufacturing sector and revitalize local economies, an effort that has led to the creation of over 700,000 manufacturing jobs during President Biden's term. But the goal is not simply just the quantity of jobs, but also the quality of these jobs as well. We have to be focused on creating manufacturing jobs and working conditions that allow workers to actually prosper and support their families. This includes rules for better worker safety, increases in OSHA inspections, an emphasis in prevailing wages when awarding federal funding, and working closely with organized labor. Mr. Hirsch, how does a unionized manufacturing workforce benefit workers and the manufacturing industry?
Thank you for the question. It benefits in several ways. Number one is it attracts a high-skilled workforce with good wages and good compensation, and it retains them so that they can accumulate skills on the job that get fed back into the production process. Number two is it gives the workers from the shop floor who understand the production process the ability to contribute and work with management in designing and more efficiencies and improving production, as well as on innovating in products.
And how does the unionized manufacturing workforce also benefit the people who buy their products and the people in the community as a whole?
Well, this is something that Henry Ford recognized when he started paying a living wage to his workers back at the turn of the previous century. He recognized that for workers and communities to be able to have the consumption to meet the growing production capacity of our economy, they needed to be paid a decent wage. So unions help provide that decent wage. When unions go away, the wages of manufacturing jobs decline. We have been adding manufacturing jobs, but on net, in large part, these are in parts of the country where labor standards are quite low and not very well enforced. So while manufacturing has been expanding, the quality of those jobs has been in decline. Essentially, we're creating American maquiladoras.
And union apprenticeships can also help us significantly boost manufacturing by helping provide us with the skilled and reliable workforce that's needed. Mr. Hirsch, what do these moves tell us about the quality of manufacturing jobs that Trump policies will create? And the moves I'm talking about are the fact that President Trump has tried to convince workers that his policies will be good for them, while at the same time working aggressively to attack collective bargaining rights and the agencies responsible for protecting worker health and safety.
Well, I think Commerce Secretary Lutnick has given us a clear vision of what these jobs will look like from the Trump administration. He says that Americans should be screwing little screws into iPhones. Now, these are not the jobs of the future that are going to make our country prosperous again.
The Trump administration also is working aggressively to strip Americans of their regulatory protections. This is a problem for all of us as industrial hazards go beyond the factory door and extend to surrounding communities as well. Without these protections in place and enforced, these hazards threaten our drinking water, the air we breathe, the food we eat, and the products we use. Some would have us believe that it's a zero-sum game, that you have to pick one or the other. Zero regulation, rolling everything back, or regulation at the wazoo and no one can do anything. But I think with the use of course, technology and a skilled workforce and good workers, we're able to have a world where everybody can thrive. Mr. Hirsch, how do current regulatory protections keep manufacturing workers safe, not just at work, but when they're home as well?
These regulations exist for a reason, and often they're working so well that people have long forgotten the problems that they were put in place to solve. When we take them away, there are going to be problems again. What they will do is shift the costs and the risks from the companies who are doing this to the workers, to the communities where production is happening, to the country as a whole and consumers. You know, people don't want to have polluted water and polluted air in their communities. They don't want their kids playing on a playground where there's toxic chemicals in the air. They don't want to go fishing where there's toxic chemicals in the water. So these regulations play an important role in preventing that. And the way we could be using tariff policy instead of this chaotic and indiscriminate approach, which is disrupting and causing so much uncertainty, is we could be using this to create a regime of high standards, whether it's for worker rights or whether it's for environmental protection, whether it's for stopping the pollution of carbon emissions, putting those costs back onto the goods that are being produced abroad without those protections.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. I want to start, Mr. Zinger, during one of the previous witnesses' testimony, it was said that that the American manufacturing is standing on the shoulders of 3D printing that was developed by other governments in Japan. Would you say that that's accurate? That you're standing on the shoulders of that technology?
Specifically as to what we do, our printing machine is not based on any Japanese patents. It's solely based on U.S. inventions, a U.S. supply chain, and is built within our factories in the U.S.
Thank you. Many critics argue that manufacturing simply can't return to the U.S. because we have high labor costs. From your perspective, what is the strongest counter-argument to that?
Strongest counter-argument is that right now we have European car makers that we are in a relatively high-cost labor market, California, shipping to Aston Martin and other companies. So Aston Martin, Bugatti, McLaren, Mercedes, and Porsche, these are customers of an American company with American workers shipping today. I think that is because American innovation can create tools for American workers that allow them to do things faster, better, and cheaper. And when that happens, then you create a competitive manufacturing infrastructure, which we absolutely can have, and we absolutely can rebuild our global manufacturing market share. But it has to be based on new leapfrog technology that exists today commercially.
Can you give us an insight as to the issues regarding supply chain? For example, the resources that you need. You have some objects in front of you that are printed with a type of aluminum. I think that the last aluminum smelter was in Southeast Missouri. It's no longer there in the United States. Is there any concerns about the core materials in that supply chain?
I'd say we have a variety of materials that range from aluminum alloys we develop to high-temp materials for hypersonic applications to high-strength materials for munitions. From the very start, and the company was founded about a decade ago, we wanted to make sure that we had a secure supply chain. So we use U.S. allied suppliers. What I would say is these are metal powders. That atomization process, there is no reason that with different areas in the United States that have cheap, abundant energy, such as natural gas, that we couldn't bring back atomization production of metal powders and scale that as we build advanced manufacturing. And that is something we absolutely can do and should do.
Mr. Power, we have had previous hearings on the situation with our energy infrastructure, and can you expound on what a company is, what's going through their process when they're deciding where to locate a facility, and how much does electricity costs and availability play into that?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. Energy costs and regulations related to energy are a huge part of where we decide to put new factories in the United States. Firstly, just for speed of building, you would be probably surprised at how hard we could build a factory faster than we could get the permits to rig up electricity to it in certain states, which is a huge barrier to speed and pace, especially in the United States. And energy costs are such a huge part of our cost base that, compared to China, I think our energy cost is 10 to 20 times without subsidies. And the second point I'd make on energy costs is 95% of the cost of aluminum, as an example, is actually the cost of energy. So having energy too cheap to meet here in the United States is not just helpful for running factories and having energy grids that can scale with all these advanced factories, but also for the raw material costs and inputs that are being passed on to our customers. So I think it's incredibly important, and strength of the grid, clean power, and then the cheapness and scalability of that power really drive a lot of the decisions of where we put factories, where we put data centers, and any advanced facility going into the American States.
Thank you. I yield back, and I now recognize Mr. Khanna from California for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Power, I appreciated your testimony and your focus on innovation, your focus on stabilizing demand, on building capacity. I noticed, even though you're here as a Republican called witness, there was a word missing in your testimony, the beautiful word of tariffs. I assume by that omission, you don't think that President Trump's tariff strategy is working in building advanced manufacturing here.
Thank you for the question, Congressman. We're not really impacted by tariffs, and it's hard for me to comment on it directly in this hearing because our entire supply chain is regulated, that we have to have everything from raw materials and everything onshore. So for United States companies that serve the defense market, we don't really buy anything offshore, and it's hard for me to comment
now,
directly.
Mr. Power, you're certainly a thoughtful person. I mean, if the president asked you, do you think his tariff policy is working to bring advanced manufacturing in the United States, would you answer yes or no?
I think we're starting to see countries come to the table and negotiate, but my perspective is purely China-focused. So,
but do you think his policy is working in terms of the way he's implemented the tariff policies?
I think we're going to start to see tariffs work over the next 90 to 100 days as things settle down.
You support his tariff policy?
I think tariff policy that means China cannot hide manufactured goods going through other countries.
I'm not asking you theoretically. I'm saying the way the president's gone about the tariff policy. Do you support it or not?
Yes, largely I support tariff
Mr.
policies
Kissinger,
to reassure United States
support
manufacturing.
Trump's tariff policies?
Yes.
Mr. Kissinger, do you support Trump's tariff policies? Mr. Kissinger? Do you support Trump's tariff policies as he's implemented it?
I am not an expert on tariff policies, and I would tell you, I am an expert, if I may finish.
You know, I noticed none of the Republican witnesses mentioned tariffs, the beautiful word tariffs. Here he is on a manufacturing industrial policy. The three Republican experts are recommending everything but tariffs. Everything but tariffs. Your testimony didn't have tariffs, correct?
I am an expert on enabling advanced manufacturing scale-up in the United States and not on tariffs.
In it, your opening testimony.
Of course not. I didn't come to testify on
Mr. Power,
tariffs.
did your testimony have any word tariff in it?
No, sir. We're asked to testify on
Mr.
bringing
Bishop,
advanced manufacturers back to the United
Did your testimony
States.
have anything to say with tariffs in it?
No.
So the three Republican witnesses come to a hearing on industrial policy, and none of them mentioned the word tariff, not one single one. And yet all Donald Trump is doing is tariff policy when the three Republican witnesses are recommending 100 different things other than tariff policy. Mr. Bishop, do you agree with Donald Trump's tariff policy?
I'm not here as an economic expert.
You're all saying you're not here as an economic expert, and yet you're giving us all these recommendations for how we build an industrial base. Is it that you don't have any expertise and we should just pick up any random citizen, or are you here as some economic expertise on industrial policy?
Is that for me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I misspoke on this. I mean, on tariffs, this is just not one of the, I mean, like these guys as well, we're focused on building companies here.
But I don't understand how
there
you
is
don't have the President of the United States is saying the way to build manufacturing is to have these tariff policies. You're here to testify on manufacturing, how we're going to build it. You're telling me you don't have an opinion on whether the Trump tariff policy is successful or not?
We're here to represent private industry, people who are actually building companies, not people who are theoretical.
This is not a theoretical matter. He's implemented tariffs. I'm not even trying to trick you. I'm saying, do you agree with all his tariff policies, or do you disagree with them? Or are you so afraid that you don't know what to say?
I think all of us have been really clear. We're here to, this is not what we're here to talk about.
But do you agree with it or disagree with it? Yes or no? I mean, you could say either things.
I have the same position as these guys. We're here to
Which
talk
is-
about how to incentivize more manufacturing and industrial
Right, but do you
jobs.
think that the president's tariff policies are doing that or not?
I think it's a mix. I think what you're,
It's
as
a
Chris
mix. So
said.
some of it is correct and some of it is wrong?
Well, what-
You think some of Trump's tariff policies haven't worked?
No, I'm saying I agree with actually what Chris was saying, is that what we've seen so far has been, and what we're going to be seeing over the next 90 to 100 days has been really interesting, especially as more countries are coming back to the table. But I can't tell the
All
future.
three of you are so afraid of criticizing Donald Trump that even though you don't mention tariffs in any of your testimonies, none of you are willing to say that this policy is totally backfiring.
I just don't want to try to predict the near future. I'm not a mind reader. I don't know what's going on in the minds of the counterparties in other countries, and I think this is an inappropriate place to be asked.
Inappropriate to ask you about tariff policy in a manufacturing hearing when that's the president's policy? Anyway, my time has expired.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Donalds from Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'm in committee at the opportune time. Look, this is a great hearing about bringing manufacturing stock back to the United States. At the end of World War II, about 40% of the world's manufacturing capacity was here in America. Today, depending on who you ask, maybe around 15%, maybe lower, maybe a little bit higher. I would ask all three of the witnesses, actually I'll ask you too, Mr. Hirsch, what has actually been the #1 driver for a lack of manufacturing capacity in the United States since World War II? Mr. Power.
Thank you for the question, sir. In my mind, it is specific CCP policies that have artificially subsidized well past the cost of good jobs and competitive labor in America, where, if you'll remember, there was a large language model like DeepSeek that got released by China, and they're charging, 1/100th of a use case versus OpenAI. And they're doing that to draw the consumer into using that product more and more and more, which obviously then captures data. It is the same sort of industrial policy that has been going on for the last 40 years, where we could buy a block of raw material in the United States of aluminum, and it will be twice as expensive as the fully landed cost, including shipping, of that same component from China. And it is not possible for them to be so cheap and competitive, apart from the slave labor conditions, because they aggressively subsidize energy, raw materials, and kind of reverse tariffs, where if I sell something to you from China to the US, I get a subsidy back from the CCP. It is a strategic policy that has pulled manufacturing out of the United States for the last 40 years, and it's been done very intentionally. So it is artificial, anti-competitive subsidies that have pulled that cost base out of the United States and therefore destroyed millions and millions of American jobs, is my opinion on the one core reason.
Mr. Zinger, if you choose to add or bring your own knowledge.
Yeah, I'll add something briefly, which is if you look at 2000, China had a 7% global manufacturing market share in 2000. That was a brief 25 years ago. With WTO, I'd say two things. Going to what Mr. Power said, we did not enforce any of these violations by China after we gave them most favored nation status. And obviously they understand that national security is directly connected, and being a world power is directly connected to global manufacturing market share. And they went about using a set of policies to capture that. At the same time, I would say driven primarily by some of our large technology companies, we started to outsource manufacturing to companies like Foxconn. So if you look at the actual kind of Industry 4.0 scale up of automated CNC machining, computer numerically controlled machining, between I'd say 2006 and 2016, you saw Apple pour $100 billion plus into Foxconn, a China-based contract manufacturing company. And they went from a couple hundred CNC machines to 150,000 automated lights out by 2016. Those two things, allowing people to cheat and undermine you from a national strategy, global strategy standpoint, and then having our process IP from our most advanced and process IP relating to manufacturing from our most advanced companies offshored to contract manufacturers and building that contract manufacturing industry around Foxconn and other contract manufacturers. That's what drove it.
Thank you, Mr. Zinger. Mr. Bishop.
Just to echo what both of my colleagues here have said, I mean, especially if you drill into the supply chains that go into the DoD right now and the massive permissive use of waivers to, I mean, there are already plenty of rules in place that would, in theory, disallow everything from electronic components to just basic machine parts that go into all of the crucial material and devices that our warfighters use. And the reality is just the massive rampant use of waivers has been a huge problem. And when you actually go and drill down into that supply chain, you're finding not only direct links to China, which are the easy ones to find, but this huge web of shell companies and shell relationships between shell companies that effectively allow China to have I mean, first of all, a huge supply chain risk directly in the DoD and anywhere wherever we want to project power.
Well, gentlemen, Mr. Hirsch, I'm sorry. 5 minutes goes fast in this town. I appreciate that. I think it's important for the committee to recognize that, you know, while the goal overall is to bring manufacturing back to the United States in as much of a capacity we can, either onshore or near shore. One thing is crystal clear. We have not been minding the store in the United States when it comes to trade policy writ large, especially when it comes to enforcement of trade policy. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Min from California for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank you for bringing this hearing forward. I also share the panelists' concerns around China and the threat that they pose to our economy. Also share the desire of everyone speaking today to bring back manufacturing to the United States. And I represent a district that does not have a lot of manufacturing, but you know, I wanted to start, but obviously it's important for our economy. I wanted to start here by just following up on the comments of Mr. Khanna. I note that all of you up there, the Republican side, said you're not economists. I wanted to give Dr. Hirsch, an economist, a chance to weigh in as well to follow up on Mr. Khanna's questions.
Yeah, I guess I'm the only one up here who supports tariffs in theory. When a tariff is targeted and strategic, it can be an effective tool for supporting industrial development. But what we're seeing under President Trump's policy is the opposite of that. It's broad-based, it's indiscriminate, it's non-strategic. It's going to be a disaster.
Yeah, and so I guess what you're saying, if I can summarize, is that tariffs can be a tool to address some of the strategic and uncompetitive behavior we're seeing out of places like China, but not when they're applied in such a blanket and haphazard way as we're seeing right now.
Absolutely, and we've seen that just in the past week or so with a determination on shipbuilding, on solar panels. We saw President Biden invoke a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles. These are all things that will contribute to rebuilding manufacturing, including the steel and aluminum tariffs of Mr. President, of Mr. Trump. Which helped keep that smelter, which Chair Burlinson referenced, online for much longer than it could have been.
So I want to follow up by noting that the view you share, that you express now, is shared by many other. In fact, I would say it's a consensus view among economists, and I know the other three are not economists. You're very careful to say you're not economists and have no views on the strategic effectiveness of these tariffs, but I just want to quote Jerome Powell, who said a few weeks back that the Trump tariffs are likely to cause, quote, higher inflation and slower growth. Janet Yellen, former Secretary of the Treasury, described Trump's tariffs as, quote, the worst self-inflicted wound that I've ever seen an administration impose on a well-functioning company. I also want to bring it back to a company in my district that does do some manufacturing. They do electronics manufacturing. And one of the things that I didn't hear any of you talk about is the way that the global supply chain is constructed these days. That a lot of the manufacturing that takes place in the United States is dependent on parts and improvements made cross-border. So the gentleman I'm describing here who spoke at a roundtable we had talked about how his goods are typically adjusted or improved in Mexico, maybe in Singapore. They come back to the United States. They cross the border many times. Each time, they're potentially subject to a tariff. That is, the aggregate of that is going to have huge impacts. He described this as something that is an existential threat to his business, the tariffs that Trump has proposed. Mr. Hirsch, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, so nothing is 100% made in America. Across the U.S. manufacturing, about 45% of the value added comes from imported content. We can't just rip that out at the roots. We have to have a strategic approach to gradually replace that without disrupting the businesses that are already operating. And when we put 145% tariff on China without that strategic approach in place, then foreign competitors in manufacturing can access all those intermediate inputs without paying a tariff. It's putting U.S. manufacturers at a disadvantage.
Yep. I'll just close by noting that I was just in a congressional delegation a couple weeks back to Korea, and we met with a number of the chaebol out there, Hyundai, LG, Hanwha. A number of them have actually committed billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to manufacturing in the United States. Following Trump 1 to try to build out manufacturing capacity here in the United States, but also in response to clear incentives. And we talk about a stick and carrot approach. I think we can characterize Trump's tariffs as a big, massive stick that's going to club every economy in the world. We had the carrots approach from the Biden administration with things like the clean energy tax credits to incentivize solar, EVs, et cetera. The CHIPS Act, which is starting to bring semiconductors back. And I will just tell you and share with you that these companies were very concerned about the tariffs policies, but also very concerned that the Trump administration would pull back on some of these tax incentives and other incentives that actually made manufacturing pencil out in the United States. What are your views, and I'll ask this quickly of the panel, Mr. Power, Mr. Singer, Mr. Bishop, Mr. Hirsch, on these programs that actually seem to bring manufacturing back to the United States?
Whether it's a carrot or stick policy or regulations that make it easier to produce American jobs, I support both sides, whether it's carrot or the stick. To just
you support those, keeping those programs in place?
Which programs, sorry, sir?
The clean energy tax credits, the CHIPS Act, some of the IRA incentives that have seemed to bring manufacturing back?
Yeah, CHIPS Act was a great bipartisan legislation that was designed to bring massive semiconductor, which is such a critical piece of the supply chain.
I think I'm out of time, so Mr. Singer.
I would agree with the comment on the CHIPS Act.
What about the clean energy tax credits?
I would have to look at them in more depth to be able to give
Mr.
you
Bishop.
a reasonable answer.
We support all the above. We're trying to incentivize more jobs here and more innovation.
Thank you for that answer. Mr. Hirsch?
Pulling back on these policies now risks stranding hundreds of billions of dollars in investments and jobs. And I'll say, my co-panelists have talked about the issue of energy costs. Just in the past 3 months, $8 billion of new energy projects supporting 8,000 jobs have been canceled.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Higgins from Louisiana for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bishop, from your perspective, what happens to the sovereignty of a nation when it loses its industrial base?
Well, that's a softball question. I feel like I mean it is, and I appreciate it
It's
because
set up for a hard question.
I imagine. No, and I'm slightly joking because you would think it'd be an obvious answer, but it seems like over many decades, no one has taken this as a softball question. It has either not taken it seriously or has come to the wrong conclusion.
So
which
clearly, you concur that the sovereignty of a powerful nation will gradually disintegrate with the gradual loss of its industrial base.
You cannot have one without the other.
You cannot have one without the other. There you go. So the loss of American industrial base largely to China. Let's talk about China. Would you concur that there's been some perceived price advantage for products on the shelves, that this has been a foundational, driving factor? Setting aside the details, basically people want more stuff and cheaper stuff, right?
It's certainly been the driving narrative.
Clearly. So the price advantage, is that the result of the price advantage from from goods manufactured in China and transported across the ocean to American, ends up on American shelves. That price advantage, in some way, is that price advantage the result of some combination of subsidized endeavors from communists, child labor, and slave labor?
All of the above.
All of the above. So there you go, America. I want you to think about this, please, as a child of God, as a compassionate human being. Do you really want a cheaper product on the shelf that's been subsidized by communists and produced with child labor and slave labor? This is what the Trump administration and some conservatives in Congress are pushing back against. We seek to establish the truth that cheap products produced in abhorrent conditions on foreign soil, subsidized by communism, and produced by child labor and slave labor, not only should they not be available for a cheaper price on our shelf, they shouldn't be available at all on American shelves, in the opinion of some. So we not only support the aggressive effort of our executive branch to push back against this worldwide, but particularly with China, we not only support it, we demand it. And some of us, I'm 63 years old. I've watched our industrial base disintegrate in my lifetime. And what we hope, and I'm going to ask you, Mr. Bishop, to address what this means for the next generation. I am prayerful that we can fix this thing in this Congress, at least change the trajectory of trade imbalance by insisting upon core principled trade deals with nations like China. And we have to be aggressive about it for the coming generation. Mr. Bishop, how would you see, if we fix this thing, what happens for the next generation of Americans if we restore the industrial base of our sovereign nation?
It's a golden era. I mean, you look at where the cities where we used to produce things, St. Louis, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. I mean, these were some of the richest cities, not just in the country, but in the entire world. We literally called it a gilded era. And what's happened over the last century, and has certainly accelerated over the last 2 decades, is something that's reversible. But we have to get very, very serious about it.
Do you believe a new golden era has been described, is achievable, good sir, if we make the necessary corrections now?
We still have time, but in my opinion, we have to get really serious right now.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we are really serious right now. Thank you for convening this hearing, and I yield.
Gentleman yields. I submit for the record a document from the National Association of Manufacturers giving recommendations for how to improve the manufacturing in the United States. Without objection, so ruled. And I now recognize Mr. Frost for his closing statement.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses again for coming to share your expertise on a very important subject, ensuring that we continue the manufacturing boom we saw under the Biden administration into the future. Like I said, this is about, of course, the quantity of jobs, but also the quality of these jobs. But I also have to bring up something that one of my colleagues, Representative Khanna, had brought up. It has to do with the tariffs policy. And while advanced manufacturing create jobs, that number of jobs will pale in comparison to the negative impact of Trump's tariffs. Tariffs are a tax on all consumers. They put the heaviest burden of that tax on middle and working class Americans. You're shaking your head. No, one of the witnesses is shaking his head no, but we just went through this, and you all conceded that you know nothing about tariffs and have nothing to say about it. Tariffs will result in greater unemployment as well. I have 3 unanimous consent requests. The first one is an article from CNBC from April 7th, 2025, entitled, "This is a Trump Recession. CEO Says with Tariff Price Increases, Job Losses Coming."
Without objection.
The other one is an article from The Independent, April 22nd, 2025, entitled, "Trump Tariffs Driving Thousands of Layoffs at U.S. Manufacturing Plants."
Without objection.
The third one is a report from the Center for American Progress from April 10th, entitled, "Trump Tariffs Pause Doesn't Pause Economic Pain, Will Cost Families $4,600 a Year."
Without objection.
This is important. I appreciate the nuance and a lot of the ideas we heard from all of our panelists that were brought up today. But if you were to ask the president what he's doing to bring back U.S. manufacturing, he would tell you to look at his tariff policy. And so it being brought up here, I think, was completely germane to the subject at hand, and hopefully next time we can dive into that as well. Thank you so much, and I yield back to the chair.
Thank you. Now, in my closing statement, again, thank you, witnesses, for coming today. Today's testimony has made one thing clear to me, something that I did not have before, which is hope. Mr. Power, Mr. Zinger, Mr. Bishop, what the efforts that you guys are working on gives me a level of hope. U.S. manufacturers stand ready to expand production here in the U.S., hire American workers, and bring critical manufacturing capabilities back onshore. Financial backers of manufacturing, moreover, are not waiting for a miracle. They've been waiting for a signal, and now they have it from President Trump, from Congress, and from the American people that the U.S. is serious about rebuilding our once great manufacturing prowess. Americans want to produce here in America. They're willing to buy products made here. The demand is not just patriotic, it's economic, strategic, and it's cultural. It's about security, self-reliance, and, yes, national pride. Reviving American industry is not just an economic goal, it's a national imperative. Industrial strength built this country. It won our wars. It fueled our prosperity and lifted generations out of poverty and into the middle class. And we can do it again. American factories can roar again. Let us seize this moment, not just to restore what was lost, but to build something even greater. Let us make American manufacturing not just a memory of the past, but the backbone of our future. Reindustrializing will make America great again, and we should all strive to help make that happen. Again, thank you for your time today. And with that, without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and to submit additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for the responses. And if there is no further business, without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.
All right, it was a great morning back. For me, I missed you guys, all right? Congress has been away. I don't know what they do on an individual basis when we have breaks like this for 2 weeks. But we're back now, and Oversight's going to keep going for the rest of the day. Maybe I'll throw some of those up. I won't be able to be on them. But what we saw this morning was Oversight and DoD and spending. Well, to recap, the Department of Defense and the Pentagon, generally speaking, does not pass audits. I think they failed 8 years in a row or something like that. The only part of the military that ever passes the audit is the Marine Corps, which don't be too impressed because it's a division of the Navy. So it's not as big as the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. Gosh, I can't. And then we just saw 11 a.m. Made in the USA. They're trying to, instill a new, the Golden Age in America, manufacturing, industrial revolution, part 2 or 3 or wherever we are now. And then, you saw Kana, and I want to bring him up because he's worth bringing up, I think. He pushed back and saying, and I think there was, an opportunity, and some of them that might have gone for it. Tariffs. You didn't mention tariffs in your opening statement. And this, the tariff discussion, I believe, has brought major manufacturers back to the discussion table. They're already, I think IBM has made a commitment. We've had Hyundai make a huge commitment. And there's others I'm not remembering off the top of my head. But those are 2 big ones. And bringing factories back to America. So I think that might have come up in Kana's exchange. But he is one of the good ones on the left. He does challenge President Trump, but he also shows up when the First Lady has her, let's say, the Take It Down Act, which is the push to remove images, non-consensual images off the internet, whether they be AI generated of a person or revenge type of situation, right? So Khanna was the only Democrat to show up to that panel, which I think that's important. And then also noteworthy, just yesterday, Thomas Massie tweeted out that he is not going to be he's not going to be voting for it because it's a slippery slope is what he says. The First Amendment and censoring speech. I think that was his argument there, which it's just like, come on, Matt. I get it, Massie, but just I don't know. Sometimes it's just I feel like it's contrarian. He just wants too much of a purist, or maybe that's the thing. You got to be a purist in this. We need Thomas Massie's. I don't know. I just can't imagine he's on President Trump's Christmas list right now. You know what I mean? Between some of the other stuff, I think he had no votes on, and then this. He's probably a thorn right now for President Trump, First Lady. Maybe not. Maybe doesn't even register. We have other things coming up. And sorry, chat, I just wanted to say anything going on. Thank you for subscribing, Laurel. Jason Mann says fish. Okay. We have more committees coming up today, tomorrow, the next day. We're back, baby. We're back. On the House side of things, let's start with tomorrow. Tomorrow, I believe we have... We just do judiciary and oversight here, so that's what I'm looking for. I mean, there's a ton going on. The markup of legislative proposals to comply with the reconciliation directive included, sorry about the phone, in Section 2001 of the concurrent resolution on the budget for fiscal year 2025. Do we have any witnesses? Nothing. Okay. That may be interesting. I do want to focus more on the Senate side of things. Last year, heavy on the House side. Senate, Wednesday. Let's find out together. Yes. Hearings to examine certain pending nominations. Do we have those pending nominations listed? Let's find out. And then let me just say this, is that these things are evolving constantly. So let's see, 4:30 nominations. Nothing. So there's nothing here now. I imagine something will be here tomorrow. We'll at least know who we're examining the pending nominations of, because I'm not finding anything here. All right. That is the judiciary in the Senate. And is there anything else going on in the Senate that is interesting? Biomedical research, certain intelligence matters. I could put this on the screen for you guys, too. I can, but do theft. That's the only real argument here. Oh, right. Are we talking about the defense not passing their audits ever? It's kind of crazy. The hubris that the feds in general, right? Feds, the bureaucrats walk around with is just, it's shocking. No, we don't pass an audit, and no, we don't do much, and no, I don't want to answer this email about what I do. But keep spending your taxpayer money on us. Wild. And it's like we need defense, so we can't not give them money, right? Or can we? So we're back. There's nothing. I'm not seeing anything that's standing out. Is Doge? When's the Doge subcommittee meeting again? I don't see it here. There's a bunch of stuff I want to see. I'm not seeing. They've been gone for 2 weeks. I'm a little angry at them for that one. What are you gonna do? Bio is interesting. Yeah, there's a bunch of interesting stuff. I try to keep a very narrow, window of things that I follow, because otherwise it just becomes too much. It's very niched here at judiciary and oversight hearings mostly. Sometimes foreign affairs, but those are the big ones. All right, Well, I really appreciate you guys joining me as it's like, a little rusty first time back after a few weeks. So thank you very much for bearing with me. Thank you. Please, check in tomorrow. We'll have something worked out, probably, I think. And keep an eye out for some video clips. There's been some good ones. I've been obsessing over the Supreme Court lately. So check out those videos. One with Gorsuch, Justice Gorsuch, and Senator Kennedy just dropped this morning. Check it out. They're talking about a kid who got arrested for burping. This is the nomination back in 2017. I think the case was, obviously prior to that. So check it out. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Amy Jane, for checking out the videos. I don't see them anywhere. The news does not cover this. They don't want you to see. I'll take it. I love you guys. Thank you so much. See you next time. Be well. And fight brain rot, subscriber. I like to say, knowledge is power. Subscribe.